My wife laughed at me. Not a nervous laugh, not a laugh she tried to hide. A full, open laugh, the kind that fills a room and invites everyone else in. I was standing in the hallway of my own home, holding a pillow and a folded blanket, and she was laughing. Her two friends were still in the living room. They'd been over since 6. It was now almost midnight. The wine was gone, the snack bowls were empty, and I had work at 7 in the morning. I had asked, politely I thought, if they could wrap things up. That was apparently the funniest thing she'd heard all year. She turned to her friends, gestured toward me with her glass, and said, "This is what I deal with." Then she looked back at me and said, "Go sleep on the couch, Marcus. The adults are still talking." Her friends laughed too. Not loud, just enough. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I took my pillow, walked to the couch, and lay down in the dark while their voices carried through the wall for another hour. But something happened to me in that dark. Not rage, not sadness, something quieter and more permanent. I had been dismissed before. I had been talked over, interrupted, made the punchline. But this was different. This was my home. This was in front of witnesses, and she had laughed. There's a specific kind of humiliation that doesn't make you want to fight. It makes you want to calculate. I stared at the ceiling, and I thought about all the times I had let things go. All the moments I told myself she didn't mean it, that she was stressed, that marriage was hard, that I was being too sensitive. I lined them up in my head, one after another, like evidence. And somewhere around 1 a.m., I stopped making excuses for her. I want to tell you this story from the beginning, because the laugh wasn't where it started. The laugh was just where I finally stopped looking away. By the time the sun came up, I had already made a decision. She didn't know that yet.
She was still asleep in our bed, rested and unbothered, completely unaware that the man she had laughed at in front of her friends had spent the night doing something she never expected. She expected me to be quiet. She expected me to move on. She expected me to bring her coffee in the morning and pretend it didn't happen, the way I always did. I did bring her coffee, but not for the reason she thought. We met 11 years ago at a work conference. She was in marketing, I was in operations. She was loud and confident and walked into rooms like she'd already won something. I was the kind of person who made sure the logistics worked so people like her could shine. We were opposites, and at first that felt like chemistry. Her name was Diane, and in the beginning, Diane made me feel like I was exactly what she needed. She said I was steady. She said I was the only person who didn't exhaust her. She said she could breathe around me. I believed her. We dated for 2 years and got married on a Saturday in October. Small wedding, 60 people. Her side of the room was louder. Mine was smaller but solid. My brother, a few close friends, my parents, who drove 4 hours to be there. The first year was good. Not perfect, but good. The second year was when I started noticing the pattern. It was small things at first. The way she would correct me in front of people. Not aggressively, just casually, like she was offering a helpful update. I'd be telling a story and she'd interrupt to change a detail. I'd give an opinion and she'd soften it publicly with, "Well, Marcus tends to see things that way, but..." I told myself that was just her personality. She was assertive. She was used to being the authority in the room. I had known that going in. But there's a difference between someone being confident and someone needing you to be smaller. Diane needed me to be smaller. I didn't see it clearly for a long time because she was skilled at balancing it. For every time she cut me down in public, there were private moments that felt warm and real. She could be generous. She could be funny. She remembered things that mattered to me. She showed up when I was sick or stressed. So I kept adjusting the scale in my head. Bad moment here, good moment there. Net result, fine. The problem with that math is that it ignores direction. The dismissals were getting more frequent. The warmth was getting more occasional. And I was doing what a lot of people do in slow-burning situations. I was adapting instead of addressing. I became quieter in social settings so she wouldn't have anything to correct. I stopped sharing opinions on topics where she held strong positions. I started measuring my words before I spoke, not because I was being thoughtful, but because I was bracing. I had married a woman who made me feel steady, and somewhere along the way, I had become a man who felt like a guest in his own marriage. I didn't call it that then. I just called it a rough patch. But rough patches have edges. What I was living in had become a landscape. The red flags didn't arrive all at once. That's the thing about slow erosion. You don't notice the ground shifting because every single day looks almost the same as the one before it. It's only when you look back from a distance that you see how far you've moved from where you started. Year 3 was when the public corrections became public dismissals. We were at a dinner with 2 other couples, people we saw regularly, people I considered friends. I mentioned a decision I'd made at work, something I was genuinely proud of, a process I'd restructured that saved the company significant time and money. Diane listened for about 30 seconds. Then she smiled at the table and said, "Marcus loves to talk about his spreadsheets." And just like that, the conversation moved on. Nobody pushed back. Nobody asked me to continue.
The moment collapsed, and I sat there with the rest of my sentence still in my mouth. I didn't say anything. I laughed a little, the way you do when you're trying to signal that you're in on the joke. But I wasn't in on it. I was the joke. After that dinner, I started paying closer attention. I noticed that Diane rarely spoke about me in a way that built me up. When she mentioned me to others, it was usually framed around a limitation. Marcus isn't great with directions. Marcus takes forever to make decisions. Marcus worries too much. Always delivered lightly, always with a smile, always just sharp enough to land. I noticed that when I achieved something, her response at home was warm, but in public it was muted. Like my wins were fine for private conversation, but not useful material for her social performance. I noticed that when she achieved something, she expected full presence, full attention, full celebration, and I gave it to her because I genuinely wanted to, but it was not returned in kind. I started keeping a mental record, not to build a case, not then, but because I was trying to understand if what I was feeling was accurate, or if I was being unfair to her. The record kept growing. Year 4 brought something new. She started making the dismissals physical. Not violent, nothing like that, but she developed a habit of patting my hand when I spoke too long, the way you'd calm a child who was getting too excited. She'd do it in front of people, just reach over and pat my hand, and I would stop talking. I don't think she knew how much that gesture did to me, or maybe she did and had decided it was acceptable. Either way, I had begun to shrink. Not dramatically, just steadily, the way a person does when the environment keeps signaling that less of you is preferred. I was still functioning, still working, still maintaining the house, still showing up. But something in me had gone quiet in a way that wasn't healthy. I just hadn't named it yet. The couch incident named it for me. The night it happened started like a normal Friday. Diane had texted me around 4 in the afternoon to say her friends were coming over. Not a question, just information. Lindsay and Carol, her 2 closest friends from her marketing circle. I knew them both. They were fine individually, but together with Diane they formed a specific kind of group energy. Loud, wine-fueled, and entirely uninterested in anyone outside their orbit. I said okay. I made sure the kitchen was clean, picked up some extra snacks on the way home, and stayed out of the way. That was something I had learned to do. Stay out of the way on friend nights. Occupy myself in the bedroom or the office. Surface occasionally to be polite, then disappear again. It kept the peace. It kept Diane happy. I had stopped examining whether it was a reasonable thing to expect of a husband in his own home. By 11 o'clock I was exhausted. I had been up since 6. I had a full day Saturday, including a call with a vendor I'd been trying to schedule for 2 weeks. I needed sleep. I walked into the living room and I was calm. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't irritated, I wasn't stomping in to make a point. I just asked in a normal voice if they were getting close to wrapping up. Diane looked at me. There was a half second where I thought she might just say yes, give it another 30 minutes. Instead, she tilted her head and the smile came. "You're really going to come in here and do this right now?" she said. I kept my voice even. "I just have an early morning. I'm not trying to rush anyone." She turned to Lindsay and Carol with that gesture. The open hand, the slight eye roll, the performance of tolerating something barely worth tolerating. "This is what I deal with," she said. And then to me directly, "Go sleep on the couch, Marcus. The adults are still talking." Lindsay looked at her wine glass. Carol smiled. Not a mean smile, but the smile of someone who doesn't know what else to do. And Diane laughed, full and comfortable, like she had landed a line she'd been waiting to use. I stood there for exactly 2 seconds, long enough for everyone to see that I had heard it and was choosing not to respond. Then I went to the linen closet, took out a pillow and a blanket, and walked to the couch. The living room was visible from the couch. I didn't look back at them. I faced the wall, and I listened to the room return to normal. Diane's voice first, then Lindsay's, then the easy rhythm of a conversation that had never really been interrupted. They stayed another hour. When they finally left, I heard Diane lock the front door, walk past the couch without a word, and close the bedroom door behind her. No apology, no acknowledgement. Nothing. Just the sound of a woman who believed that what she had done would cost her nothing. She was wrong. 3:37 p.m. The apartment went quiet around midnight. I could hear Diane moving around in the bedroom for a while. Water running, the television on low. Then nothing. She was asleep inside of 20 minutes, which told me everything I needed to know about how that night had landed for her. For her, it was already over. A minor friction. A husband who needed managing. Nothing worth losing sleep over. I lay on the couch with the blanket pulled up and stared at the ceiling. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I was doing something I hadn't done in years. I was thinking completely clearly, without the usual background noise of trying to be fair to her. I thought about Lindsay's expression when Diane made the joke, the quick look down at her glass. Lindsay wasn't cruel. She was uncomfortable, which meant even Diane's friends understood something had crossed a line, even if no one was going to say so. I thought about Carol's smile, the smile of someone who had seen this before and had made peace with not intervening. I thought about how routine it felt. That was the part I kept coming back to. Diane hadn't hesitated. She hadn't considered how it might land. She had dismissed me in front of witnesses with the ease of someone who had done it so many times it no longer required thought. That's when I understood something I had been avoiding for a long time. This wasn't going to change. Not because Diane was a monster, but because she had no reason to change. Every time she had pushed, I had moved. Every time she had dismissed me, I had absorbed it and come back the next morning acting like it hadn't happened. I had trained her, without meaning to believe there was no cost. I had been so focused on keeping the peace that I had made the peace worthless. I reached down and picked up my phone from the floor. It was 1:14 a.m. I opened my email and pulled up a contact I had saved months ago, after a conversation with my brother that I hadn't fully admitted to myself had been about my marriage. A family lawyer, someone my brother knew professionally. I had saved the contact and told myself it was just good to have. I stared at the name for a long time. Then I opened my laptop. I didn't draft an email right then. What I did was quieter than that. I opened a document and I started writing. Dates, incidents, specific words she had used. The dinner party in year 3, the hand pat, the way she framed me to other people, the couch, all of it, in order, without emotion, just facts and dates, and a clear record of a pattern I had been trying not to see. By 2:30 a.m., I had 3 pages. I read them back once. Then I opened my email and sent a message to the lawyer. I kept it short. I said I needed a consultation as soon as possible. I said it was regarding a divorce. I closed the laptop, pulled the blanket up, and closed my eyes. I slept better than I had in months. The consultation was at 8 a.m. on a Saturday. I had told Diane the night before, casually, while she was making coffee and I was pretending to read my phone, that I had a vendor call in the morning and would be out for a few hours. She nodded without looking up. That was fine. That was normal. The lawyer's name was Patricia Holt. My brother had described her as someone who didn't waste time, and he was right. Her office was clean and spare. No decorations designed to make you feel emotional. Just a desk, 2 chairs, and a woman who had clearly heard 1,000 versions of this conversation and was ready to hear mine. I walked her through it. Not emotionally. I had the document I'd written on the couch. 3 pages of dates and incidents, organized and specific. I slid it across the desk. She read it. She asked 3 questions.
Then she told me what my options were. I won't go into every legal detail, because that's not the point. The point is that by 9:15 that morning, I had a clear picture of exactly where I stood, what I was entitled to, what the process would look like, what the first step was. Patricia told me the first step was filing a petition. She said she could prepare it within a few days if I wanted to move forward. She said I didn't have to decide right then. I told her I had already decided. She nodded like she had expected that. She pulled out the intake paperwork and we went through it together. My full name, Diane's full name, date of marriage, shared assets, the house, 2 cars, a joint savings account with a balance that I had contributed to more heavily than Diane had, something I had documentation for. I signed what needed to be signed that morning. Patricia said she would file by Monday. She said Diane would be formally served within the week, depending on the process server schedule. I thanked her, shook her hand, and walked out into the morning air. It was just after 9:30. The street was quiet. People were walking dogs. A coffee shop across the road had a short line out the door.
Everything looked completely ordinary, which struck me as strange given what I had just done. I sat in my car for a few minutes. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel sad. I felt the specific calm of a person who has finally stopped waiting for a situation to fix itself and done something real instead. I drove home. I walked in. Diane was on the couch watching something on her tablet, still in her robe. She looked up and said, "How was the call?" "Fine," I said. "Productive." She went back to her tablet. I went to the kitchen and made lunch. She found out on a Thursday. I know the exact day because I had been counting quietly, the way you do when you're waiting for something inevitable. Patricia had filed Monday. The process server made contact Thursday afternoon, while I was at work and Diane was working from home. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed. A text from Diane. All it said was, "Call me." I finished the meeting. I called her on my way to the car. She picked up before the first ring completed. "What is this?" Not a question, a statement. Her voice was doing something I hadn't heard before. It was tight and controlled, but there was something underneath it that wasn't controlled at all. "It's what it says it is," I said. "Marcus." She said my name like a warning. "You need to come home right now and explain to me what you've done." I told her I'd be home at my normal time. I said we could talk then. She hung up before I finished the sentence. The drive home that evening was the calmest 30 minutes I'd had in years. I wasn't rehearsing arguments. I wasn't bracing for impact. I had already done the hard part. Everything from here was just consequence playing out. She was standing in the kitchen when I walked in. The divorce petition was on the counter, the pages slightly crumpled, like she'd picked it up and put it down several times. She looked at me like she was seeing someone she didn't recognize. "You filed for divorce," she said. "Yes."
"Because I told you to sleep on the couch." I set my bag down. "That's not why. That was the last thing in a long list of things." "What list?" Her voice climbed. "What list, Marcus? We had an argument. Couples argue. You don't file for divorce because your wife's friends were over too late." "I filed for divorce because of 11 years, I said. The couch was just the night I stopped pretending." That landed. I saw it land. Her expression shifted. The anger cracked just slightly, enough to show something more complicated underneath. Then the anger came back harder. "You went and saw a lawyer," she said. "You planned this. You sat there on that couch and you planned this without saying a single word to me." "You didn't say a single word to me either," I said, "when you walked past the couch that night. Not one word." She opened her mouth and closed it. "You laughed, Diane, in front of your friends. In your own home, you laughed at me, like I was something you tolerated. And then you went to bed. It was a joke. It wasn't the first one." The room went quiet. She sat down at the kitchen table, which surprised me. I had expected more volume. Instead, she sat down and pressed her hands flat on the table and stared at them. "You're serious," she said, quieter now. "I've been serious since Monday. Marcus, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can talk about this properly." "I tried to talk," I said. "You handed me a pillow and an audience." She looked up at me, and for the first time in a long time I saw something genuine in her face. Not performance, not social calibration. Just a woman who was realizing, fully and without cushion,
that she had miscalculated the cost of something she thought was free. "I didn't think," she started. "I know," I said. "That was the problem." I picked up my bag and walked to the guest room, which I had quietly moved some essentials into 2 days earlier. I closed the door. From the other side, I heard nothing for a long time.
Then I heard her crying, not loud, just the sound of something that had finally broken through. I sat on the edge of the bed, and I let the silence hold. The first person Diane called was Lindsay. I know because Lindsay texted me the next morning. Not a long message, just, "Marcus, I had no idea things were this bad. I'm sorry for my part in it." I appreciated that. I didn't respond, but I appreciated it. Diane's version of events moved through their social circle quickly. I expected that. When people are blindsided, they need to explain themselves, and explanation requires an audience. She told people I had filed without warning, that I had been cold and secretive, that one argument about a couch had turned into a divorce petition without any attempted communication. She left out the 11 years. That's the thing about selective storytelling. It can work for a while because the people hearing it only know what they're told. Her friends had seen me as the background husband for years, reliable, quiet, present but not prominent. It wasn't hard for her to frame me as someone who had overreacted. But the story had edges she couldn't smooth over. Carol, to her credit, told Diane privately that she had been uncomfortable that night, that the way Diane spoke to me in front of them wasn't something she could pretend she hadn't seen. I only know this because Carol told a mutual friend, and the mutual friend told me, and I stored it away without making it ammunition. I didn't run a counter-campaign. That was a deliberate choice. I had watched enough situations like this play out, in families and workplaces, to know that the person who says the least usually ends up looking the clearest. Diane was filling airspace because she was scared and scrambling. My silence wasn't weakness. It was positioning. I continued showing up to work. I kept the house maintained because we were still technically living in it, in separate rooms, while the legal process moved forward.
I was civil to Diane when our paths crossed. I didn't slam doors. I didn't make meals into confrontations. I didn't interrogate her about who she was talking to. She found my calm unbearable. About 2 weeks after the filing, she appeared in the doorway of the guest room. She had clearly been preparing herself for the conversation. She was composed, measured, her professional register, the one she used in meetings. "I want you to know that I've heard what you said," she told me, "and I've been thinking about it seriously. I've already looked into couples counseling. There's someone with good reviews who has availability next week. I think we owe it to 11 years to at least try." I looked at her for a moment. "Why now?" I asked. She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, why is the marriage worth fighting for now, when there are papers on the table? What changed?" She didn't have a clean answer for that. She said something about realizing how serious I was, about needing a wake-up call, about not having understood how I was feeling. I listened to all of it. I didn't interrupt. Then I said, "Diane, I spent years trying to show you how I was feeling. I don't think the problem was communication. I think the problem was that you didn't believe there would ever be a consequence." Her composure slipped just slightly, just enough. "And now that there is one," I said, "you're willing to engage. That tells me something important about what the engagement would look like." She left the doorway without responding. The social circle kept shifting. 2 couples who had been firmly in Diane's column quietly reached out to me, not to take sides, just to check in. That meant more than they knew. She asked for the conversation herself. About 3 weeks after the filing, Diane knocked on the guest room door on a Sunday evening and asked if we could talk. Not argue, talk. She said she wanted to understand, and the way she said it was different from before. The professional composure was gone. She just sounded tired. I said yes. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she had pressed her hands flat and stared at them the night she found out. I noticed she chose the same chair. She didn't start with an argument. She started with a question. "When did you stop believing in us?" I thought about it honestly before I answered. "I didn't stop all at once," I said. "I stopped in pieces. A little at the dinner where you called me a spreadsheet guy. A little more every time you patted my hand to shut me up. A little more every time you introduced me to someone in a way that made me smaller. It wasn't one moment.
It was a direction. She was quiet. I keep trying to find the thing I can point to, she said. The big thing, so I can fix it. That's the wrong way to look at it, I said. There wasn't one big thing. There were 100 small things that all said the same thing, that you didn't respect me. Not privately, maybe, but publicly, in front of people, in the spaces where it sticks. I did respect you, she said, and I could tell she believed that. You respected what I provided, I said. The stability, the income, the logistics. You respected the function. You didn't respect the person. That sat between us for a while. I didn't know I was doing it, she said finally. I know, I said. That's not an excuse, but I know. You were operating on a pattern that worked for you, and I kept letting it work. I have responsibility in this too. I should have said something clearly, years ago. I kept adjusting instead of addressing. She looked up when I said that. I think she expected me to carry the whole weight, and when I didn't, when I took my portion of it honestly, something shifted in her expression. So what happens now? She said. The process keeps moving, I said. Patricia is handling it. It's been clean so far, and I'd like it to stay that way. And there's nothing. She stopped. Started again.
Is there any version of this where you stay? I didn't answer immediately. I gave the question the respect it deserved. No, I said. Not because I hate you. I don't. But because I know what I would be agreeing to if I stayed. You'd try for a while. Maybe 6 months, maybe a year. And then the pattern would come back. Because the pattern is comfortable for you, and I've shown you I'll absorb it. I'm not willing to go back to absorbing it. She nodded, very slowly, like something was settling. I didn't mean to make you feel that small, she said. I believe you, I said. But you did. We sat there for another few minutes without talking. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was just two people at the end of something, being honest in a way we probably should have been years earlier. When she stood up, she didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. And neither did I. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. It was clean, the way I had wanted it to be. No courtroom drama, no scorched earth. Patricia handled it professionally, and Diane's lawyer was reasonable. We divided what needed to be divided. The house sold in 6 weeks. The joint account was split according to contribution records I had kept. I walked away with what was fair, and nothing more. I moved into an apartment on the other side of the city. 3rd floor, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a window that caught the morning light in a way I liked immediately. The first night there, I sat on the floor because my furniture hadn't arrived yet. I ordered food, ate it out of the container, and looked at the empty walls. I didn't feel victorious. I want to be clear about that. There is nothing triumphant about the end of an 11-year marriage. There is no version of that story where everyone walks away whole. Things were lost that I had genuinely valued, early memories, shared history, the version of the future I had once believed I was building. I felt those losses. I let myself feel them.
But underneath the loss was something I hadn't felt in years. Space. Not physical space, though that was part of it. Something internal. Room to have an opinion without measuring it first. Room to speak without bracing. Room to take up the amount of space I actually occupied without someone signaling, constantly and casually, that less of me was preferred. I hadn't realized how much energy I had been spending just managing myself down. I thought about Diane sometimes. Not with anger. The anger had burned off somewhere around the 2nd month, which surprised me at first and then didn't. Anger requires ongoing injustice to sustain itself. Once I was out of the situation, the fuel was gone. What I thought about instead was the pattern. Not just hers, mine. I had been a willing participant in my own diminishment for longer than I wanted to admit.
Not because I was weak, but because I had confused endurance with loyalty. I thought staying quiet was the same as being a good partner. I thought absorbing things was the same as being stable. I had built an identity around being the person who didn't make things difficult, and in doing so, I had made it very easy for things to be done to me. That was the lesson I carried out of the marriage. Dignity is not something you protect by staying silent. Silence doesn't preserve dignity. It just delays the cost of losing it. There is a version of this story where I say something clearly in year 3, where I sit Diane down after the dinner party and say directly and without anger that the way she speaks about me in public is not acceptable and will not continue, where I give her a real chance to understand what she's doing and choose differently. Maybe she changes, maybe she doesn't, but at least the boundary is named. At least I give the marriage the honest test it deserved, instead of the slow, quiet collapse it got. I didn't do that. That's on me.
What I did instead was wait until I had nothing left to absorb, and then I acted decisively. And the decisiveness was right, even if the timing was late. I'm not telling this story to make Diane a villain. She was a person with a pattern she'd never been asked to examine, in a marriage with a man who kept declining to ask. We failed each other in different ways. I'm telling it because I know there are people sitting in rooms right now, on couches, in guest bedrooms, at kitchen tables, doing the same math I was doing, adding up the good moments against the bad ones, telling themselves it evens out, adjusting instead of addressing. It doesn't even out. It compounds. The laugh wasn't the wound. The laugh was just the moment I finally admitted the wound existed. And the morning after, when I filed, I wasn't punishing her. I was just done negotiating with someone who had never believed the negotiation was real. Some people only understand a boundary when it costs them something. I stopped waiting for her to understand it any other way.